The reading this morning is from Matthew 16, verse 13 to 17. Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." This is the word of the Lord.
Now, what does one choose as the theme for their first sermon series when they've just been made vicar? Jesus is a pretty good start, right? That's a pretty good start. Maybe a safe bet to start by looking at him. But I'm struck by that wonderful line in C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. They're asking about Aslan. I think it's Lucy is asking about Aslan because he's a lion. And there's a lot of encouragement to put trust in Aslan and to go and see Aslan. And of course, Lucy, as a child, says, "Well, he's a lion. Is he safe?" And the answer is, safe, no. But he is good. So maybe not a safe bet, but I hope a good one. I hope a good thing that after 6 or 7 weeks that we'll have, we will come to know a little bit more, well, a lot more about Jesus, but particularly look at that question and be able to answer it a bit better for ourselves. Because that question we're going to come to, I think probably again and again, "Who do you say I am?" is a really important question. And I think it is asked of us still today. And people still do talk about Jesus today. He is still part of not just the sort of the church's conversation, he is part of the world's conversation. Just a couple of weeks ago, on one of the social media platforms, I saw a list of the top 10 most influential people to have ever lived. Okay, so it listed them, and what it did is it listed their name, it listed where they were born, and it listed the year of their birth. Okay, so the top 10, first was Einstein, second was Isaac Newton, third was Jesus of Nazareth, fourth was Muhammad, then Darwin, then Galileo, and so on. Now, I think this was designed to farm clicks and responses. And you know what? It did. The arguments of who should be top, middle, bottom, no, this person should never be above that person, what about this person, why is there no women? Lots and lots of very good statements were made. But the one that was the most sort of liked, and if you clicked on sort of most relevant at the top, gently pointed out that if Jesus is only third, why have we dated absolutely everybody else's date of birth from his death? Because it all says AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And I obviously that got a lot of clicks, a lot of likes, and it fulfilled the reason that thing existed. But it goes to show that he is still talked about. And I would contend is the most influential person to have ever lived, or indeed still lives. Now, there are lots of worldly reasons to think that. Somewhere between 2.4 and 2.6 billion people declare him to be their Lord and follow him and his teachings. And that's quite a lot of people in the world today. Words and phrases that we still use in the day-to-day, well, they came from Jesus. If you've ever told someone that if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, well, that was him. That was from him. And people who have followed his teachings throughout history have done so to set up and establish the first hospitals, have fought for civil rights that we now have, if we abolished slavery, to name but a few things that were done in Jesus' name and following his teaching. I would say that's enough. And Jesus asks that question in the passage that we've heard. Who do you say I am? And that question is still relevant. And the reason that it's relevant is that the answer to that question should determine how we live our whole lives. If the answer is nobody or a good person, then it should impact us a little. If the answer is God himself, it should change absolutely everything. Jesus himself is teaching and is challenged about his teaching in this context and why his teaching is different. And he was challenged by other teachers. And he tells a story in response. And those of you who went to primary school have probably heard the story of the wise and foolish builders. So you've got two people who built the same house. One built it on a solid foundation, on a rock. One built it not so good, on sand. And when the storms came, well, the one that was built on the rock stayed, and the one that was built on the sand fell down. Jesus said this to show that actually his teachings were not just things that you could use bits and bobs of, but actually were there designed to change everything. I love it how the Message interpretation of the Bible puts it. It takes the theme of housing, and it says, these things were not meant for mere redecoration. These were structural changes that were needed. Structural. So not just mere decoration. Jesus didn't just teach that actually you can take a bit and bob and you can change a little bit. No, Jesus was quite clear that he intends his teachings to change the very structures of our lives. And the passage goes on to say that he is a different teacher because he speaks with a different authority. The authority that comes with being God. These aren't just words that recommend a bit of life redecoration. These are foundational things, it says. Now, when Jesus asks his disciples, and you see it here in this passage in Matthew, and you see it mirrored in Mark, you get different answers. So some say, you're the prophet, come back. It's great. Which prophet? We're not quite sure, but a prophet. Some say John the Baptist didn't actually die and it's actually you. Some say somebody else, good teacher. Some say that you're the Son of God. And Jesus says, but that's great about what they say. Who do you say that I am? If you were to ask that question out there, I wonder what the answer would be if you just walked down the street. There was a wonderful Youth Alpha video a few years ago where they did exactly that. They asked the question, who do you think Jesus was? Now, I remember it really well. We used to do it in the school that I worked in, and the answers were quite varied, but they were usually quite positive. It was sort of, he was a good guy. He was a great teacher. He was a philosopher. All of these things. And I think that's probably similar to what you would get today. If you went out and asked, who do you think Jesus is? They would say he was a good teacher. He was a great human. I mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier. He wrote a lot more than the Chronicles of Narnia. He wrote some adult fiction, which I never quite got into, but I don't know. But he also wrote some theology. And there's one book that I used to give to people as they were coming in and around the chaplaincy, which is called Mere Christianity, that he wrote. Those of you who've been around the church for a while will probably know it. But in it, C.S. Lewis asks exactly this question. But the thing is, he says that the most likely answer, that he was a good man and a good teacher, or as he puts it, a very good human teacher, he says isn't an option. He says that's not an option that Jesus gives us. It's not an option that he allows us to hold to. And the reason it's not an option is because he declares so often his divinity, that he is God. And he gives three options that you can pick. He says, well, if a man declares themselves to be God, well, they might be telling the truth. In which case, he is divine and he is the Christ, and actually we've got to take what he says very seriously. But you might find that a bit challenging. So actually, you've got a couple of options if he's not telling the truth. One, that he's intentionally not telling the truth and he is a liar. So he's not the Lord, but he is a liar. And that he is intentionally and knowingly set out to deceive people by declaring himself to be God. Now, if someone is a liar setting out to deceive in their whole ministry, well, I'm afraid good teacher and good human is no longer an option, is it? So we can't say that anymore. You can only say that if you think he's telling the truth. The other option is that he is deranged. C.S. Lewis uses another L word. He says he's a lunatic. And again, if a man is that unhinged and goes around teaching these sorts of things, I'm afraid you're still not left with the option of good human and good teacher. Because a good person would not say those things if they were not true. Now, there is a much longer and much better summary available probably just through AI these days. So do Google it, or even better, go and get the book. Because it will take each of those and pull out what C.S. Lewis thinks are the answers to some of those. But good, and good man and good human, is not one that's left to us. The challenge that comes from Jesus is either you think that he is God or you don't. And if you think that he is, well, that should change absolutely everything. We're going to look at Jesus over the next 6 or 7 weeks. And then actually after that, we're getting to Advent, and it'll be Christmas before you know it. And as we go through Advent, we'll be looking at some of the prophecies that are said of him, that he fulfills at Christmas in his coming. But as we go through, we're going to be looking in depth at Jesus. And on occasion, it's going to be in real, sort of in-depth theology. So actually, what is his nature? What is it to have a person who is fully man and fully God, and why did he come to earth in that form? We're going to look at that. We're going to look at the cross that we so often talk about. And we use so frequently in our language in church, you bring things to the cross, or that happened on the cross. They say, well, actually, what did happen in the spiritual and physical realms? What happened that day on the cross? Why did he die? And what did it mean for us? So we're going to be looking at some big theological things. Some things, I've got other people to do those bits, don't worry. But we're also going to be looking at some of the basics. Well, if those things are the case, if we come to agree those things, well, what does it mean for us? How do we respond? What does it mean to accept him as a Lord? What does it mean to be his friend? Why does he offer us that? What will eternity look like? All of those sorts of things through the eyes of what it is to know Jesus. My hope is that we are able to answer that question, who do you say I am, in a much more informed and engaged and personally owned way. And the reason that is important is because Jesus doesn't just ask us that question, as in, I mean, us that are watching this today online, or those of us that are sat here. I want us to be able to ask everybody else that question. I've talked about outreach a few times and about a renewed sense of proclaiming Jesus and who he is, and I want to be able to do that. But to be able to do that, we've better be sure what we believe first, right? Collectively as a church and as individuals. Because I think Jesus asks that question of everybody, and I want everybody in Clitheroe and further afield to be able to be challenged by it. And so we'll get loads of different answers. We'll get lots of different answers from different people because they're at different places and at different walks. But for some, they will come to say that he is the God, the Christ. And will come to understand and accept that for themselves. And that should mean that that will change everything for them and for us. So that's why that's quite an important question that Jesus asks. Because it should inform our lives and it should shape our mission. And he asks us that today. Who do you say I am? As we continue to engage in song worship, and we'll do that in a second, as we continue to meet with him at communion and in prayer, and as we do it over the next few weeks in learning more and more about him, I would love it if you could challenge yourself each week with that question. Because my hope is that it will not remain static. That through each week there will be something new of him that you will come to see and come to learn and come to internalize for yourself. So have a think. At the start of a new series and at the start of a new ministry in this place, what's your answer to that question? Think about it. Hold on to it. And let's see how it changes over the next few weeks, because I would love us to be able to take that question out into the rest of Clitheroe.